Hi everyone, and welcome to the third lesson in our Poetry GCSE series. In the first week, we were looking at a poem called Bayonet Charge, which is from Power and Conflict. Last week, we were doing Mother Any Distance from Love and Relationships. Each week, we're going to be doing a poem from one of the anthologies, but treating it like an unseen poem. So you're getting a little bit of advice on how to do the unseen section if you're doing that, or you're getting some advice on some of the poems you're doing if you're sitting seen poetry, the poetry anthology, either Power and Conflict or Love and Relationships. So last week, we also were looking through things to do with structure, or the first week, sorry. Second week, we were looking more at language generally. This week, what I thought we would do is try and combine the two in a fairly difficult poem called My Last Duchess. So let's dive straight in. So My Last Duchess, it was written by Robert Browning. I won't do a huge amount of context because I want this to be more as an unseen poem, and in the unseen section, no one needs to worry about context. But a little bit of a background to this, just because I think it helps you understand the poem a bit better. His wife was very sick, so he had to move from England to Italy, and that's where he got more interested in Italian history. And the poem is at least loosely based on a real historical figure called the Duke of Ferrara. So Ferrara is a place in Italy and it had dukes. So there you go. And that's a picture of him. So that's Browning. That's the Duke of Ferrara. And there was a rumor or a suspicion that the Duke of Ferrara killed his wife. Hence My Last Duchess, this idea that she has been killed. And what's interesting is, spoilers, towards the end of the poem, he's actually looking to marry another duchess. So, that will become his new duchess. And then she will really be his last duchess, the one previous, right? So the poem is really in three sections. What we're going to try and do is talk a bit about the structure, which will be obviously building on the first week. Talk a little bit about language, which we're building on second week, and then putting some things together to try and create a little model paragraph for how to answer a question on this poem. So if we have time. So let's start by reading the entire poem, which will take a couple minutes. And then I'll give you some sort of thoughts on the structure of it. Now, just so you know, as I've said in the structure lesson, which I recommend you check out if you haven't already seen it, you can look at line lengths straight away. You can see that the line lengths are somewhat erratic, kind of ins and outs. Not crazy, like if we tried to create a line for this, let's try and do that. We could create something like that, and it's not totally terrible, but some lines are fairly significantly to the left, or like shorter, and some are fairly significantly to the right. So overall, I would say that this is not a very even line length poem. It's all written in one stanza. We'll talk about that later, but well, actually, let's just talk about it now. It's because it's a dramatic monologue as a poem. So everything comes from the voice of the Duke. That also then links to like the power of the Duke's voice, the fact that he gets to like say everything and nothing comes from the Duchess's point of view whatsoever. And yeah, that's a couple of things straight off the bat that you can look at and that you could comment on. Any poem, you can always look for line lengths, you can always look for stanzas straight away without reading anything. You can dive a little bit deeper pretty quickly as well. You can look for caesuras, like you've got one here, and on Jumblemon, you've got that here and here and here and here. Oh, and yeah, so you can see quite a lot of this stuff straight away as well, even before reading. But anyway, let's read the poem. So My Last Duchess by Robert Browning. That's my last Duchess painted on the wall, looking as if she were alive. I call that piece a wonder now. Fra Pandolf's hands worked busily a day, and there she stands. Will't please you rise and look at her? I said, Fra Pandolf by design, for never read strangers like you that pictured countenance, the depth and passion of its earnest glance, but to myself they turned, since none put the curtain I have drawn for you, but I, and seemed as they would ask me, if they durst, how such a glance came there. So, not the first of you to turn and ask thus, Sir, 'Twas not her husband's presence only called that spot of joy into the Duchess's cheek. Perhaps Fra Pandolf chanced to say, her mantle laps over my lady's wrist too much. Or paint must never hope to reproduce the faint half flush that dies along her throat. Such stuff was courtesy, she thought, and cause enough for calling up that spot of joy. She had a heart, how shall I say, too soon made glad, too easily impressed. She liked whate'er she looked on, and her looks went everywhere. Sir, 'twas all one. My favour at her breast, the dropping of the daylight in the west, the bough of cherry some officious fool broke in the orchard for her, the white mule she rode with round the terrace, all and each would draw from her alike the approving speech, or blush at least. She thanked men, good, but thanked somehow, I know not how, as if she ranked my gift of a 900 years old name with anybody's gift. Who'd stoop to blame this sort of trifling? Even had you skill in speech, which I have not, to make your will quite clear to such a one, and say, just this or that in you disgusts me, here you miss, or there exceed the mark. And if she let herself be lessoned so, nor plainly set her witch to yours, forsooth, and made excuse, e'en then would be some stooping, and I choose never to stoop. Oh, sir, she smiled, no doubt, whene'er I passed her, but who passed without much the same smile? This grew, I gave commands, then all smiles stopped together. There she stands as if alive. Will it please you rise? We'll meet the company below then. I repeat, the Count your master's known munificence is ample warrant that no just pretence of mine for dowry will be disallowed, though this fair daughter's self, as I avowed at starting, is my object. Nay, we'll go together down, sir. Notice Neptune, though, taming a seahorse, thought a rarity, which Klaus of Innsbruck cast in bronze for me. So having read the poem now, you can see I've put these lines to break the poem up into 3 places. So just having read the poem, you can kind of see that there's this arrogant tone to the Duke. The way he speaks is, you know, as we might expect someone to speak who feels that they're above murder, being caught or punished for murder. And he just thinks he's the best thing in the world, right? So the incredibly long stanza, which is all from his voice, shows his sense of importance, the fact that he gets the final word and everything, kind of links to the power that the upper class would have had, especially in this time. So we get that. Let's just talk about the 3 sections of the poem as well. Well, the other thing, just quickly on structure, is as we read it, you probably noticed it's clearly a dramatic monologue. Everything is coming from the poetic voice as if it were the Duke. So all of that enjambment that we sort of noticed before, all of the caesura, all of this is just meant to make it sound very natural, naturalistic speech. It's him speaking to a messenger. That's what's going on in this poem. And so the poem is broken up really into 3 bits. So the first bit is him speaking about a painting of his Last Duchess. So you can tell that that's the case because, you know, it starts literally the first line, that's my Last Duchess painted on the wall. So we can tell he's clearly speaking about his Duchess, or his Last Duchess, looking as if she were alive. So there's this kind of irony in here, but also that clearly straight away shows that she's not alive anymore. She has potentially been killed by him, but she's died somehow. He obviously doesn't just say, I did it, I killed her. So looking as if she were alive. He repeats this name, Fra Pandolf. Now, again, this is slightly contextual, but you would notice this even unseen, as an unseen piece, I think. Like, he mentions this name a few times. So the name of the artist is Fra Pandolf. Now, back, to give you the context of it, back in the day, wealthy people would have friars, and a sort of nickname for a friar back then was a fra. Rich people would commission them to paint paintings for the wealthy. So he's sort of trying to show off here. He's like, look, I got Fra Pandolf. You know, imagine it's like Banksy or like some famous artist. I got the artist right now to paint this for me. That's how powerful I am. So it's all, again, his display of his arrogance. And yeah, that's a repeated thing, that he really wants to show this off. We also see through the language the control that he has over his Duchess. So he talks here about none puts by the curtain I have drawn for you, but I. So not photos weren't around in the olden days. Old paintings, you might have seen this in museums or historical buildings or things somewhere at some point. Sometimes the paintings will have curtains drawn over them, or sometimes you'll see a painting with like a set of curtains to the side of them, like as if the curtains have been drawn back. And it was very common back then to protect the paintings and to show your ownership of your paintings, that you would have curtains to hide the paintings if you didn't want someone to see them, because you own that piece of art, so only you got to see it if you chose to be that way, right? And so he's very controlling. He's basically saying, look, you wouldn't even be seeing this painting if I didn't draw the curtain back for you to show you. So this shows his arrogance again. It shows his power over the situation. And if we assume that he has killed his wife, his Duchess, it even like adds a more sinister tone to that, really. The fact that that's the case, that he gets to hide it if he wants to and only draw the curtain back on who he wants to. Another thing in the painting, obviously the painting is filled with like little hints and foreboding, because Browning did believe that the Duke of Ferrara killed his wife. So he talks about the half flush that dies along her throat. This is near the end of describing the painting. So a half flush is when you can see the paint stroke, like the paintbrush's stroke on the canvas. And apparently there's like a little paint stroke line across the throat of the Duchess. So even this is kind of suggesting that the way that the Duchess was killed, potentially. And that's also very disturbing, basically, to think that he's kind of almost maybe showing off a little bit that he killed her, and maybe he had her killed by, or killed her or had her killed by having her throat cut. And yet here we have like this little subtle thing in the artwork of this half flush that dies on her throat. So that's the first bit. It's this section here is all about the painting. Then he goes on to herself, like what she was like when she was alive. So he talks about how she was too easily impressed. Oh, definitely didn't mean to do that. Too easily impressed. Whatever she looked on, her looks went everywhere. And, you know, she thanked everyone with the same level of gratitude, whether it was him with his 900 years old name. So this is like really important to him, his title, his name. Back in those days, the surnames of people, the names of people were really important. But he's juxtaposing that with anybody's gift. He's saying like, she should have thanked me more. She should have been more grateful to me because I married her and I'm the Duke of Ferrara and I have this surname and blah, 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 right? So we get a motive now of why he might have killed her, because he didn't like the fact that she was nice to everyone. He wanted her to only be nice to him and only be grateful to him. So again, this shows his arrogance. It also shows his controlling, manipulative nature. He's a bit psychopathic, right? There's also some jealousy for sure. He's jealous of that, the fact that she thanked everyone. He's also jealous that she had a bit of a, you know, gratitude for a gardener or some sort of worker of theirs that helped her with a cherry orchard. Now, some people have suggested that the fruit imagery is maybe also suggesting that the Duke of Ferrara thought that his wife, the Duchess, had an affair with this man as well. Because quite often fruit and flowers and things can be seen as like fertile imagery, sort of somewhat sexualized imagery. So there's that in there as well. We're running out of time, I'm afraid. This is a bit of a shorter one, but so this section definitely shows some motives. He even says, even then would be some stooping and I choose never to stoop. So that is him even saying, look, I wouldn't have reasoned with her even if I could have reasoned with her. So that's subtext. All of these obviously are language bits that we're going through that kind of link to that structure as well. So the fact that he wouldn't stoop, he would choose never to stoop. Again, his arrogance, his power, his control. The fact that he didn't want to reason with his wife, basically. He just wanted her to be perfect for him without ever telling her how to be, without her being even a bad person that deserved to be changed. So that's that bit. And then the final section, this is where we get to the cyclical nature of the poem. So it comes back to that kind of idea of structure a little bit. He talks about how this man, this messenger he's been talking to, he's from the Count. The master of this messenger is the Count. And it turns out that there's talk of a dowry. Dowry is what fathers would give to people who were about to marry their daughters, so the husbands there. So that's that. And he even then talks about Neptune, which is a seahorse that has been tamed for him in a bronze statue. So we get this very disturbing image that finishes the poem off, which is of the Duke who's talking about getting married to this new person's daughter, the Count. They're discussing the dowry. So the Duke is going to be given a chunk of money by the Count to marry his daughter. And we get this horrible sense that he's done this in the past, and maybe the bronze statue of Neptune taming a seahorse is a piece of artwork he got done from his last Duchess before he married the last Duchess. And we get this horrible image to finish with, that maybe this psycho man kills his wives and then has artwork made to kind of like subtly commemorate that he's got away with this murder. So there's a little bit of a synergy between language and structure. We don't have time, sadly, to do a model paragraph as well. Maybe I could do another little video to attach to this or something on top. But there's a breakdown of My Last Duchess. So if you are doing Power and Conflict, or if you're just trying to treat some unseen poetry, this is a good way of going through it. Just look at the structure, look at the language, start to combine it and think about how it presents the poetic voice. So in this case, we have a very arrogant tone to that poetic voice of this Duke. Try and link it to some ideas that seem to be coming through the poems. Hope that was a little bit helpful. Good work, and I'll catch up with you in the next one.